Hey everyone, this is Kiki Tobar, and you're listening to Kashmir Talk, your number one podcast for entrepreneurs, small business owners, and growth mindset individuals. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Kashmir Talk. I am your host, Kiki Tobar, and this is Kashmir Talk. So this podcast, I just wanted to do solo again. I have really tried to have some of the most influential people in my life on the show thus far, and I have more to come. So, a lot of people have asked me, what is the purpose of this, podcast? Like, are you trying to do something? Like, what's your intention behind it? And honestly, I just think that it's just something that I've wanted to always do. And I've mentioned it before in the past. I tried to do a podcast, probably in 2020, and it did not work out after lots of milestones and lots of, trying to figure it out. It eventually got there, but I just got to the point, like maybe in March, April, and I kind of had a epiphany. I've gone through milestones in my life where I've really almost, seen the floodgates open up, or a little glimmer of the potential that I feel like I'm holding back on myself in. And I had a little bit of that moment, probably in April. And I just felt like, you know what? It's selfish of me to not do this. I think it's something that's been calling to me for a while. And podcasts are hard, man. They're the long game. They take a little while to set up. They take a lot of time and money and resources. And I'm just very grateful for all of you who thus far have just reached out and shared it. And this is what's going to continue to help it grow and help others. At the end of the day, that's the only reason I'm doing this, because I've mentioned it before in the podcast. There's, I mentor a lot of people inside of business and hairstylists, but this podcast isn't just meant for hairdressers. It's just meant for anyone who feels like they don't add up and they can never do something. They see other people doing something and they don't think that they're worthy of that. And that's kind of something that I want to talk about today. So I've thought a lot about what the theme or title of this podcast should be. And I've just been thinking a lot about self-confidence and self-worth and what that means, and how you could look at somebody and see them from the outside and think, how can they just do that? How can they take risks? How can they jump to the next level? Like, what is it about them that's giving them that power and that confidence to take it to the next level? I want to tell you a story about when I was younger and the type of person that I was raised to be. I was raised in a very religious background, and it was very Christ-centered. And a lot of the things that we talked about when I was young were self-worth and just knowing that no matter who you are, Christ loves you. And I think that I kind of used that self-worth inside of me to just know, like, no matter what I did, no matter who I was enough inside of who I was as a person. I was a child of God. And whether you believe in God or you don't, I always look at my daughter and I look at now that I'm raising a child. I think even if I weren't raising her in a Christ-centered home, if you don't believe in that or you're not Christian, it's fine. But I just want her to know, no matter what, that she's loved and there's not even anything that she could do that would make her feel that she isn't valuable. And I think that takes a lot of work inside of the home. And if you weren't raised with that, that takes a lot of work later on down in your life. And I was raised with a really strong foundation of that I am enough. I am divinely perfect the way that God made me to be, despite my insecurities, despite my flaws, if you will, or my trials. When I was going through a lot of infertility issues in the beginning, it was really hard for me to kind of like get over that fact, because it was something that I felt like was almost a punishment, if you will. I think anyone who struggled with that maybe has felt that, or any other type of flaw in their life or any type of health condition or health issue. At one time or another, you may come across the thought, or the thought may come across your head that I'm being punished for this, or this is something that I deserve. And it wasn't until I reached the other end of that trial and the other end of that hurdle that I understood that it wasn't because I was being punished. It was because God wanted it to happen that way, or fate wanted it to end up that way, or it was the plan. It was a part of the plan. It was a part of the timing. And I strongly believe in that now that I've gone through that. I think there's so many people that I've impacted, so many things that have happened in my life that I've able to do because of going through that, and almost God postponing that thing to happen in my life when it did, or fate, trying to let everything roll out how it should. And so I was always raised with this background. And I think my parents, I'm so lucky to have them. I'm so lucky to have two parents that love each other and that have stayed together. And I think that's a blessing in my life. I see it as one, but I think that it was just really important the way that they taught me to know that I can pretty much do whatever I want. I remember my dad telling me one time, Kiki, you can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. I think we were driving the car and it was just one of those light bulb memories for me. And it was like, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Almost like the glass is a ceiling type of attitude. And I'm not necessarily like, that's just kind of how I was taught. I feel very strongly about talents, and the way that this is like hard for me to like almost paint into a story, because I think about it so often, but then once you put it into words and you want to share it with somebody, this is why I wanted to do this, because what I really want to say is, if you have certain talents or you have certain things that that are something that you want to share, or even something that you're good at, if you're listening to this and you're young, or if you're listening to this and you're older, the number one thing I want you to get out of knowing your talents and finding them is to never let anybody squash them or tell you that you don't need them or that you are too much with them. So I was always told, and I was always, very artistic. And I think I did a lot of dancing and I did a lot of artistic things. And I remember I excelled really well competitively very fast. When I was 12, I was put on a competitive dance team with girls that were in high school. And it was very crazy because no one else was given that opportunity. Number one, I was really tall, so I looked the part. But as a 12-year-old, I remember, I think I was actually 13, I was in junior high. And I remember I was dancing with girls who had boyfriends and who were in high school and were driving cars. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. I don't even know if I'm like worthy to do this, but I trusted the mentorship and I trusted the judgment of my coaches. And so I went along with it and I did it. And I remember just feeling that entire experience from the outside point of view of people who maybe weren't in that position, that it wasn't that they were making me feel that I didn't deserve it, but I could feel the judgment and I could feel the envy coming from them. And I was so young that I didn't really know how to use that energy, and except for to perform better. So I used it as fuel and fire. And I used it to just excel even more. And it gave me a lot of confidence because I knew like, okay, I can do this. I can do hard things. I'm trusting my coaches. I'm trusting everybody. And, my parents, I'm sure, were thrilled to see it. But it's one of those things that even from a young age, you can't let these like talents or amazing things that you can learn to do be squandered or squashed because of somebody else's insecurity or the way that somebody else may do something. I was not the popular girl growing up, so I actually wasn't even asked to prom. My sophomore and junior year, I was asked to prom my senior year because I had a long-term boyfriend. And the reason I had a long-term boyfriend was because of that track record of just never getting asked out on dates, never getting asked to dances. And deep down, that was a really big insecurity for me. Now, hindsight, I look back and I'm like, okay, I get it. I mean, I was literally almost 6 feet tall. I probably intimidated, and I was taller than the majority of the boys in high school. So I took it on my own initiative to just be friends with all the boys. And it was hard for me because I wasn't that popular girl. I was not the homecoming queen. I envied that almost. And I very much did not enjoy high school because I felt so insecure, because I think that I thought that dating and being asked out and being the popular girl, getting asked by multiple boys to go to dances. I don't know if any of you ever had that same experience growing up where it was very focused on courtship and all those type of things in school, but it was, and that's just how it was. And because I didn't excel inside of that, I felt very insecure. And it was just a weird experience going through it, because it almost helped me understand at a very early age that popularity doesn't matter. Who you were in high school doesn't matter. And I think it's so important to just know, like, your past doesn't represent who you are today. And I don't even think that I would enjoy going to a high school reunion, because I didn't find a lot of confidence and a lot of support inside of my upbringing. The majority of people that I actually talked to, which is fascinating, is they actually also did not enjoy their high school experience. So I guess those little reunions or whatever they may be are for people who really enjoyed it, and that's great. But I look at my life and I'm like, wow, I'm really grateful for who I have become. And I didn't let that one experience define me, or I didn't let the things that people said to me define me, or, not being the popular girl or whatever it may have you. It wasn't until I went to college where I had experiences where everybody was coming from somewhere else and didn't have any friends and were more open to having those experiences, where I was like, okay, like, this feels more natural, like real life. And I would challenge you, if you have friends in your group circle, if you're young and you're listening to this, you're like, I kind of feel like that. Like, I feel like my friends are almost competitive with me, and they are trying to do things better than me, or make me feel like I should, like, diminish my talent or my values or even who I am. I think you don't need them. Like, coming from me in my 30s and having so many mentors and clients and friends in their 40s and 50s, it's like you don't give a shit about people and what they think the older you get. And it's just wild now that I've looked at it. And if you really just kind of like put the blinders on and you don't kind of think about what anyone else is doing, that's when you can really have those moments where you can decide, like, who do I want to be? Like, thinking back to that car drive with my dad, like, Kiki, you can really do anything that you want. You can be whoever you want. You just have to mow your grass straighter than the next person next to you. So that was a funny little thing that my dad always told me. And so I got all this confidence. I, was like, okay, like, I can have friends, I can have people. But at the end of the day, when I started to do hair and I started to get that confidence built and everything, I felt like, oh my gosh, like, this is great. I have so many people, they want their hair done by me. This is great. I'm like a little celebrity in this little small town where I grew up in. And it wasn't until I got squandered again when I moved to Los Angeles, and I was like, oh man, like, this is a whole another playing field. It's a dog-eat-dog world out here. And that's when my confidence was rocked. I thought, you know what, this is going to be easy. I had a lot of people kind of that were saying, like, oh, you can do it. And then I had a lot of, naysayers, and I just kind of tried to just stay true. And I had a lot of confidence built up. I had made a lot of accomplishments in my career up until that point. And I felt like I was a really good hairstylist. I knew that my talents and my efforts and my confidence could just shine through, and I could be who I wanted to be. Little did I know, everyone else in the whole city of Los Angeles was competitive and good and excelled in their career just like I did. And I was really nervous to kind of do it, but I knew I could do it. Deep down, I knew I could do it. And easier said than done. Man, that freaking first year was the hardest year. I went from having so many clients knocking down my doors, crying because I was leaving my small town, to literally not even being able to get or convince a client walking down the street to come see me for like $100 for a full service. I could not get one person to sit in my chair. And it got so bad after like 6 months of just never seeing clients sit in my chair that I just like cried myself to sleep because I was so upset of just not even being able to have the ability to try and prove myself. I had tried and exhausted lots of my options, and I wasn't quite sure how to spin the game again. And it was just like, man, I can't freaking seem to make this work. And meanwhile, the money is diminishing, the finances are running out. And, I'm just like, okay, like all my life savings since moving here is almost gone. And what am I supposed to do? So I get a part-time job. I start working at a hair school, and I'm teaching, and making at least some kind of money. I felt the confidence slowly come back because I was serving others, and I was kind of putting my hand out. Even though I wasn't making a lot of money, I was at least able to express my talent and practice and do what I loved to do. And that's what I would strongly recommend any of you who are like, I am at like the freaking lowest of lows right now. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I just feel like I can't even be myself. So whenever you're feeling those moments, think back to what you used to do when you were a child. When I was a child, I used to draw and I used to create art. My mom is a painter and my uncle is a painter, and I would go to class with her. I would draw, I would do paintings, and it's something I genuinely really enjoyed as a child. And I think I'm a very artistic person by nature. And think about, brainstorm, and kind of visualize, who were you as a child? Like, what did you really like to do? And at the end of the day, I think I always say that at the end of the day, but it's like, if you want to be happy, find that child inside of you and bring it back to life, because you'll chase the money for a while and you'll do something where it'll make you feel good because financially your bank account is growing. But if you're not feeling happy, you might have lost that child inside of you. So when I learned to do hair, it was like it was back again, like this artistic part of me. I was able to express it in a new way with fabric, texture of hair, doing all these things. And when that was kind of ripped away from me, it essentially felt like it was ripped away from me when I moved to LA and I didn't have anybody who wanted me. I didn't have anybody who wanted me to do their hair. Hell, I would have done it for free if my salon would have let me. They didn't permit it, but I had lost it. It was gone. And with that, my confidence dropped and I didn't feel like I was worthy or valuable anymore. So when I started this job of teaching at the school, I felt like, and I had this epiphany, okay, I'm doing what I love to do, and I am doing my talent, what I love to do as a child, and simultaneously I'm serving other people. Sure, I'm getting paid for it, but nevertheless, a little bit of service never hurt anybody. And I think that's the thing that built my confidence just a little bit here. So I was able to just snatch it back slightly. And I saw the light bulbs happen in the students' eyes, and I saw them come to school every day a little bit stronger. And I felt so good about myself that I was making a contribution, and also at the same time being able to express that child inside of me, the artistic part of me. And the depression went away slowly, every day, every shift. And then I evolved and I started to see myself in a little bit of a different light and understood that I could do it again. The lowest of lows for me inside of this whole experience was when it was a dark story. I'm going to tell you this story. And I tell my students this story because sometimes they feel like Kiki, like you were in Los Angeles. You were in Los Angeles. You're in Hollywood. You're by all of the celebrities. You are able to charge a pretty penny for your services. Sure. Okay. But let's bring up the fact of this whole first part of the story of like, okay, it was not easy. It was like no one would throw me a bone. No one would even sit in my chair. People did not want me. I didn't assist anybody famous. I didn't assist the celebrity hairstylist that, works on Kim Kardashian or what may have you. I didn't have anyone in my deck. So I'm trying to get people to sit in my chair and there's nothing. So initially the salon gave me a cabinet. They gave me a cabinet to work out of and they were like, okay, like you can put your color stock in here. And when you do clients, it's your own little space. And I said, cool. So when I would do my clients, I would come in, maybe once a week and do a client here or there. In the meanwhile, I do my shifts at the hair school. And it eventually got to the point where some other stylists in the salon were getting a lot busier than I am. And they were double and triple booking and getting so busy to the point that they were bartering with the management, asking if they could just have more space in the salon. So what that happened was they had a conversation with me about how I needed to diminish the space that I was given and put it in a suitcase. And then when I was doing my clients, I could just bring my suitcase with my supplies and work on them because I didn't have enough clients to use the space. So I'm trying to tell you it in a factual point and not an emotional side because there's facts behind everything and then there's the emotional side behind everything. And of course, the day that happened was the most emotional day probably in my career. There was so many tears. But then there's the factual side of it too, where it's like, you get it. Like, you have to understand that it's a business. And if you're not bringing in numbers and you're not bringing in people and bodies, you don't deserve it, right? So I understand that now owning a salon. I get it. Warm bodies equals profit and revenue. And if I had somebody that wasn't bringing anybody in, even if they were really trying, and it came to a point, I probably would have handled it a little bit differently versus letting somebody pack their suitcase up and, roll it down the alley full of their, basically everything that they owned. And at the time, my husband and I only had one car. So I called him up in tears. I could barely hold it in. And I said, I need you to come pick me up. And I was so embarrassed that I didn't even want to stay at the salon to wait for him to come pick me up. So I packed everything up and I couldn't even bear to even look at anyone in the eyes because there was a few people who came into the back and were like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, why are you packing up? Like, are you leaving? Because I had already been there for at least 6 months. And I said, yeah, I'm not leaving, but, I guess that there's not enough room for me. So I'm just, packing up. I tried to be like as the least dramatic possible as I could. And I'm sure that they probably didn't even see the impact it made on me because I didn't really unload or let the emotion go until I had closed the back door and I was rolling my suitcase down the alley. My suitcase was red. I still remember it. I think I got rid of it in my last move because probably trauma, PTSD. I get in the car, I'm literally sobbing, and my husband just said, he didn't tell me this at the time, but he said, I'm going to take work. He told me later on, I took the day off because I saw it in your eyes that it was the hardest day that had ever happened to you in your career. And it was the lowest point in my career. And I still feel so emotional about it when I talk about it because the feelings come back and the hurt comes back because I just had a little glimmer of confidence that I had received from doing this other part-time job, and
I was starting to feel a little bit better about the situation, and you have this little bit that you're holding on to, and you're gripping it so tight, and then you're knocked back down. And it almost makes you feel like you're even further than rock bottom. And if you're listening to this, I know that you're thinking of something in your life that's happened too, where you're like, man, I think it might be easier to give up. It might be easier to give up, but I've come this far. I've packed up my entire life. What is everyone going to think of me if I come home with no money, nothing to show for it, no success? And then I come back, and even worse, what am I to think of myself 10 years down the road? 12 years down the road, 20 years down the road, when I have kids and they ask me, Mom, remember that one time that you tried to live in LA? Remember that one time that you tried to do something different? What do you think your life would have been like if you hadn't have given up? And whenever you're in the moments of those hard times, where you have the decision, because it's always a decision. Whenever you have a decision to make, whether you want to move forward or essentially quit because there's really no other option, envision yourself in that moment of what you're going to say to yourself. 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, or even on your deathbed, what if? What if I didn't quit? What if I exceeded all of my expectations? What if I actually did what I thought I was going to do, and I did even more? There's no regret inside of that. There's no regret in not quitting. You'll never regret it. And I knew there was something deep down inside of me. I knew I was not going to give up that fight. And the deep-rooted part of that decision had nothing to do with what anyone else thought of me. It's what I had to think of myself. And who do I think I am? And what do I deserve? Do I deserve this? And am I worthy of this? If this all pans out and I have the success that I want, whether it's financially, physically, emotionally, do I deserve it? Should I have it? Will it be worth it? And all of this is about the way that you view yourself. What no one else thinks of you, your colleagues, your partner, your parents, your children, it's not about that. It's about what you think of yourself, how much you love yourself. If no one else was left on this planet, would you still do it? Half of this has got to be finding that internal child and helping them out and doing what you really love to do, serving others inside of it, and celebrating the accomplishments that you've done strictly for yourself, not for anybody else. When you can get to that place of self-loving and self-worth, then you can start to envision what the next step looks like. And so much of what I've done so far in business and coaching teams and training people and mentoring people, I've done it now a lot over the last 5 years or so. And so much of it has to come down to self-worth. And so much of it has to do with trauma or, emotional maturity and just working through who you want to be, who you are, who you aspire to be, who you deserve to be, and how much the other end, how much you love yourself, to follow through with all those things. At Kashmir, in my business, we don't tolerate a lot of excuses. I'm a very compassionate person. I'm so emotional. I'm a Leo. I have a huge heart. And what I want is not just for me to win. I don't study horoscopes a lot, but what I do know about Leos is they want to win. They want to be on top, but they're not really willing to do it unless they can take everyone with them. And I think that would explain me in a nutshell, because I love to do things. I love to make big wins, and I love to be successful, and I love to travel, and I love to enjoy the finer things of life, but it's not super fun if I don't have people with me. So Austin, my husband, has been a big part of that. Just being with him for the last 12 years. We got married when we were very young. I was 19, but just kind of seeing that and knowing, okay, I want you to be with me. And the way that we operate at Kashmir and our teams is very much so like that. It's so important to me that all my team members love themselves and that they work on it. And if they can't get past it, I can't save them. And I can't push them to the next level if they can't get past that point of letting everything they do get in the way of their lack of self-love and their lack of self-confidence. So there's a difference. There's loving yourself, which is maybe, self-worth and feeling like you are valuable and you're enough with everything that you have, and then deserving whatever you want. And then there's confidence. And the two are different. You could walk into a room and have confidence to perform any service or anything, or pull any deal, or perform any task perfectly, show it on stage and have a stage face. I see it all the time happen with artists. They are confident, they can do it, but at the end of the day, they don't get to where they want to get to because they self-sabotage. And the reason why they self-sabotage and they don't get to the next level is because they don't feel like they're worthy. They don't love themselves enough. They don't feel like they deserve it because they don't have that self-love. And when people, ask me how did you do it? How did you go there? How did you do this? Or I don't even know, this is a question I get a lot. How did you lose the weight when you had the baby? I don't want this to come off in a superficial way, but also in my upbringing, just the way that we learned about our bodies. It was our bodies are sacred, the way that we treat them, the way that, in the things that we consume. And it's kind of been ingrained in me, and maybe in a brainwashing way in the beginning, but now it's really taken me far. So I still don't drink alcohol, and I still don't consume any drugs. If you're listening to this and you do those things and it works for you, great. But I value my body, and I don't want to put anything into it that may alter my state or help me and make me have to recover at some point. I'm a sure big lover of caffeine though, so maybe that's my downfall. But even inside of that, it's okay, am I drinking this sparingly? Am I drinking this to the point where I'm going to feel tired tomorrow and I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight? I'm always making sure that whatever I'm consuming in my body and whatever I'm doing with my body is going to benefit me for tomorrow and in a week from now and forever. And that comes down to my diet and the way that I eat and the way I even exercise or even treat my body and the way I consume energy and the way I talk to people, I'm selfishly always thinking about, what is this going to do for my body? How am I going to feel tomorrow? Is this going to be worth it? And this has been something that I have worked on inside of myself really strongly over the last 5 years. Because sure, I could just tomorrow decide, hey, like, you know what? I made it this far. Good job, Kiki. You haven't drank alcohol. Why not start today? Why not? Seems like everyone else in your life is doing it. You might as well. It doesn't seem like it affects them that much. But why would I bargain? Why would I make that gamble? Because at the end of the day, do I know for a fact that it's going to help me? Or I would argue that if anything, it will hurt. And why would I want to put myself in that position? So I'm grateful for that bringing that I have been given. Low-key first time in the beginning, brainwashing for sure, to not drink alcohol and being kind of felt like you are going to go to hell if you do this, into now it's turned into a principle of, okay, this is helping me. This is a decision that I choose to make every day that's going to help me. It's going to benefit me. It's going to benefit my daughter, and it's going to benefit my husband. If my husband decided tomorrow that he wanted to drink alcohol, I can't force him to do that. I can't force him to do anything or want to do anything because he's his own person. But he sees the way that it impacts me, and I bet you for a fact that if you've asked him the same thing, he would say the same exact answer because we're on the same wavelength as far as that goes. I would probably still love him if he did, but I'm in love with him because he chooses to do things that benefit him because he loves himself. And I think that's why I've seen our relationship be strong and consistent for the last 12 years, because we low-key are a little bit selfish, low-key love each other, and low-key love ourselves. And that's what makes relationships, because you can learn to love each other. And I would love to have him on this podcast. I've told him, like, you're not allowed to be on it in the very beginning because you talk too much and you need to learn how to edit your words. So we're working on that. But I think that this is a good way to wrap up the podcast today, because, you know, it's just something that is so important to learn, and it will affect you in every single part of your life. Self-love affects your relationships. It affects your posterity. It affects you. It affects your team members, your friends, your parents, your life. And it's going to be the thing that's going to impact who you turn into and who you will be in 20 years from now. And when you're gone, you're going to meet, I believe, you will meet your best self. You will see who you could have become, or if you actually fulfilled all that potential. And I at least for sure believe that you'll be able to rewind and look at your entire life and what you've done, which low-key may be a little scary. But I'm excited for that, because it's a challenge for me every day to become better than I was the day before. So that's where we're going to leave today. For all of you who are listening, I love when you share on your stories. It's amazing. And if there's something that you want me to talk about for what I do, again, this podcast isn't like in relation to exactly one specific topic or people. It's really just an outlet for me to connect with all of you and to be able to lift everybody up. We, for now, are doing podcasts every other week, so every other Thursday, because it's a lot, but I would love to do it every Thursday if it comes to that. Please share it with your friends and family. Share it on Instagram if you have one. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Kashmir Talk Show, and YouTube as well, if you want to watch the full version in video, and on Spotify as well. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more. Love you all.